The October 28, 2020 meeting of the Yarmouth Planning Board is about to convene. As a precautionary measure to reduce the spread of the coronavirus, this meeting will be held by remote participation. My name is Kathy Williams, and I'm the Yarmouth Town Planner and will be serving as moderator for this virtual meeting. I will now turn it over to the Planning Board Chair.
Welcome to the October 28th, 2020 Yarmouth Planning Board meeting. My name is Joanne Crowley, and I am Chair of the Yarmouth Planning Board. I'll begin by taking a roll call to establish quorum. Tom Barron?
Present.
Susan Britta?
Present.
Brad Goodwin?
Here.
Elizabeth Hartsgrove? Will Rubenstein?
Present.
Chris Vincent? Joanne Crowley, present. With a quorum present, I will now call the meeting to order. The moderator, our town planner, Kathy Williams, will now explain how remote participation will work for this proceeding.
Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, this meeting of the Yarmouth Planning Board is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access and participate in the proceedings as provided for in the order. Persons who would like to view this meeting while in progress may do so by watching via this virtual meeting or the live feed on the Town of Yarmouth YouTube channel. You may also listen to the meeting by dialing into the number provided on the meeting notice. For all meetings, all audience participants enter the meeting muted. Participants will be unmuted when called upon by the chair or moderator. If you're not speaking, please mute yourself to avoid unnecessary background noise. Do not use speakerphone or Bluetooth devices when speaking. All votes must be roll call votes. We have no applicants or presenters for this evening. Public comment. None of the items on the agenda this evening are a public hearing that require a designated public comment period. However, public comment can be taken at the discretion of the chair. Members of the public may request to speak by selecting the raise hand button or *9 on their phone and waiting to be called upon. Members of the public recognized by the chair are asked to identify themselves by first and last name and affiliation for the public record and then provide their comment. I'll now hand the meeting back over to the chair.
Thank you. Our primary topic for discussion this evening is continuing on our community visioning project. We've had a couple of developments this week. We had some homework assignments as of our meeting last week, and we have some new materials to review this evening. With regard to the public participation plan as suggested by Horsley Witten, we sent a letter to the Cape Cod Times this week for publication in their My View column. In an effort to invite and engage the public through the public media. I hope it will be published soon. All of you have received a copy of that Kathy and I put together. We've also reached out. Kathy asked us to pick up flyers for distribution. I trust that all of you have had a chance to do that. To drop at various places where we might congregate offline when we're not doing planning board duties. And thirdly, we were talking about outreach to various segments of our community. And Will, thank you for reaching out to the Yarmouth Police Department. Maybe you could just give us a quick update on what you've done and what you think the next steps are for engagement with them.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. This morning, I met with Lieutenant Cal Bogdan, who is the head of the Yarmouth Community Relations Team, which was formed in the last 60 days, roughly. Through him, we've certainly agreed to collaborate because what I learned from him is that not only is the Yarmouth Police eager to engage with the community and perhaps survey, but allegedly, perhaps even the Yarmouth Chamber of Commerce is thinking about doing the same. And so just big picture right out of the gate, something to be aware of, Madam Chair, that we might have a lot of different entities within our own town trying to ask our own residents stuff. And of course, that concerns me because of a million reasons, which I'm sure you can all imagine, the biggest one being, I'll just call it survey fatigue. Not to mention we're in the middle of a political season, and I'll just leave it there. So I don't know where the tectonic plates are shifting, but that is something that was news to me, and I felt like it should be shared with this board because there could be an opportunity to do more with less surveys. So that's number one. Number two, he did share some very preliminary but very important members of the community, the NAACP of the Cape, and some other folks, which I am going to be reaching out to hopefully tomorrow, because as we said in the previous meeting the week before, the right thing to do is to make sure that the entire community knows about this project and this process from the beginning, not in the middle, and not, hopefully for sure, not at the end. The second piece of the thing we talked about was in terms of that was basically the African American community. We also talked about the Brazilian community, and I have a couple of personal, and he has some connections as well for some. There's a small business, Brazilian small business group that meets every morning, and some of them are my neighbors, which is great, and some of them are people I work with, and also those are folks who, even if they don't live in Yarmouth, they have employees who live in Yarmouth. The other avenue is going and reaching out to the Assembly of God Church on Mary Dunn Road, because in terms of, people of faith that are Brazilian, even if they live in Yarmouth, they're not necessarily practicing their religion in Yarmouth. So we have to be able to go outside of our own town in order to get people inside our own town. So those are the headlines. We can talk later more about when we talk about the survey itself. Obviously, as you can imagine, Lieutenant Bogdan is very intrigued and eager, to be a part of what we are doing just from the civic engagement full stop perspective of the police department wanting to help its citizens know what the Yarmouth Planning Board is doing. But specifically, I feel that together, he and I, and with others yet to come, I really do feel like more folks who may or may not usually participate in a survey like this are at least going to know about it, and they're going to know about it in the next week. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Well said, Will. I appreciate your efforts on that. We really appreciate the time you're spending with that. And with that, we're going to move on to the primary discussion tonight with regard to the survey. I think we've all received an updated version, both paper and the actual Survey Monkey. I hope people have had a chance to take a look at it. I'm going to turn over our discussion at this point to Kathy, where she can bring us up to date on what's happened, and then walk us through the important next steps, particularly for next meeting on November 4th. Kath?
Yeah. Hopefully everyone has had a chance to go through the survey link that was sent out there, the preview link. I think the beginning, Joanne and I had a meeting this morning, and it talked about maybe some edits to the preamble to make it a little bit more clear, and to have the same kind of messaging as the letter that was going into the Cape Cod Times. So that first paragraph's a little bit different. I have the survey. I can share my screen and we can go through it together if you would like, or I don't know what people would like to do.
Do we need to do that? I think we've all seen it. I trust everybody's looked at it, maybe for the public, Kathy, since this is a public meeting. Why don't you throw it up there and we'll just walk through it. And then what I would like to have is that we all, at the end of all this, agree that this is going to be the survey. That's the important outcome that we want from tonight's meeting.
So can we hold some comments till the end, Madam Chair? Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's okay.
Should
Go
we
ahead.
hold our comments till the end? Would that be the best thing in order
I think
for
so.
the public to just hear the big picture? Okay.
I think that would be a good idea. So Kathy, why don't you take us through it?
Sure. This is just the preamble that kind of gives people a very brief outline of what the planning board is doing and how it benefits us with regard to providing some input for our decision makers in town, as well as helping us with our local comprehensive plan. And then how much we need people to get involved and how you can get involved with the virtual workshops, and then also with this survey, and giving an idea of when the survey would run through. I just picked January 15th. That's something that we can certainly discuss. And then just letting people know what's going to happen with all of the survey data and the workshop data we're going to be taking that to help create our vision statement for the community. And then, of course, it sends you to the link for all the great places for additional information and for registration. And then just thanking people for signing up and because their feedback is very important to our process. So then this just gets back into the questions that we had talked about last time, the open-ended questions, and just identifying them 1, 2, and 3, and allowing people to fill in as much or as little as they'd like in each of these categories. You have to put something in just to kind of move through so it understands that you've participated in some way. And then it moves on to those demographic questions that we spent some time on last time. So you can go through this multiple times. Depending on what you pick for this first one, you'll get different questions being asked of you. So if you live in Yarmouth, you get different questions than if you don't live in Yarmouth. Then you could say where you live, whether you own your own home, how long you have, and then you go on to the next question. So we've identified where you live and what you're doing, but do you also own a business in town? Yes, I own a business in town. So how long have you been in business in town? Less than 5 years. And then moving on to the rest of the questions is, how else do you experience Yarmouth? Do you also work in Yarmouth or visit Yarmouth? And you always have the opportunity to put in something other. And then we get into the questions of how old are you? I'll put my truthful number in there. Do you have children under the age of 18 in your home? No. And then, do you participate in a local or community organization or sit on a town board or committee? This is to get an idea of kind of where people's affiliations and interests might be. I'm going to just say no for the sake of this. And then, of course, where did you learn about this survey? It can be multiple places. And then you're done. And then what they've done with the preview is you can preview the survey again, and you can answer the questions differently. So you as the board can see how different answers get you to different places in the question. I don't know if we wanted to go through some other options for people, but
I think we should understand how it goes.
okay.
We all should have drilled our way through it. I answered all the questions no, just to see. Do you live in Yarmouth? No. No. Thank you, Kathy. I guess it could be visit or other. Visit is fine. And then it would be, I go to church in Yarmouth. I don't live here, I don't work here, but my church happens to be here, as an example. Or anyway, that's just an example that I went through where I answered them all no.
And I'll put Joanne's accurate
And my
age in.
truthful age, there we go. And that would be a no on under 18.
Nothing changes if you sit.
Yeah,
yes,
the rest of it is all.
The rest of it is all the same.
Yeah,
No-
the same.
Yep.
So, Will, you had raised your hand first about some questions.
Thank you. Just a couple. I have two, let's say, administrative things, and then a couple that are a little more substantive. In the outreach work that I've been doing that we've previously discussed during this meeting, I got to thinking, and I don't know the answer, but I know that the school system has done a very good job of sending out their notices about everything in multiple languages.
They do.
And I would like to know if we are going to be engaging with the Brazilian community, are we going to be sending out our information in Portuguese? And I say that because it just sort of struck me that if and when I start to engage with the Brazilian community about this survey, there's going to be a barrier that we are not going to be able to cross if we only offer it in English, much less the actual, look, this can get bigger or smaller, but I wanted to ask the board if they had considered Spanish and or Portuguese as part of our community engagement process. So that's my first question, Madam Chair.
Okay, so Kathy,
Well, sure.
I'm going to ask you, is there a town protocol on public information distributed by the town that typically would identify Portuguese as a majority minority in the town, and have a translation?
I think most of the translation has to do with like fair housing and that type of thing. I know Mary Wagon has a lot of different brochures and posters and things that are in multiple languages. I have not personally, in the stuff that we've done, converted things into different languages. I think if we feel, I think that would be much easier to do with the survey of potentially converting like a hard copy of the survey, perhaps into a different language. Trying to have multiple languages in the Survey Monkey, that might also be possible, but that is not something that we had anticipated doing.
Yeah.
Kathy, could I ask a question? I don't know how to raise my hand, so I just have to jump in. I'd actually like, Kathy, use you to get a question to Will. In his conversation with the police, do they use bilingual materials, or what's their experience been with the Brazilian community in terms of printed literature?
That's a good question, Susan. Thank you. I can hear you. I can't see you,
Okay.
which is I'm sorry about, but I can hear you.
Okay. Did they mention anything at all, Will, about that?
I didn't ask that specific question, Susan. I know that they have hired some police officers of Brazilian heritage. I mean, I think that's what I would do if I was Chief Frederickson. So I'm glad to hear that that has actually happened. But in terms of how they develop and then share their materials, I don't know what their protocols are. I guess, like I said earlier, Susan, I was taking my cue from Carol Woodbury in the schools. And believe me, they go Spanish, English, Creole, Portuguese. Right. I mean, there's a much bigger population that I guess they've identified between the two towns that they serve. Again, not trying to make anything more cumbersome or more challenging, but I feel like this whole line of conversation fits with the idea of community engagement as well as engagement with the entire community.
It certainly does. And I just like, again, Kathy, I know in various documents that I might find on the internet, it can prompt you with what language. And then the Survey Monkey can come up in Spanish, or it can come up in Portuguese. I mean, I've experienced that. So I'd be interested to know if that capability for the electronic version, and even the paper version, we might be able to explore with Horsley Wooden how that might be done. I think we might want to, I look for comment on this, limited to a couple of major languages for translation purposes. And then we'll need to know how much that might cost for translating it back into data that.
Does Will know who does that translation for the school?
You know, that I don't off the top of my head. I just know that whenever I get a PDF from the school, it goes on and on and on and on and on because it's all one giant PDF in I want to say 8 languages.
Yep.
Well, that's
so
because
they must have a system funds. Sorry, Brad.
They take federal funds. They have to, just like Mary Wagon takes federal funds with people she works with. So they have to put in all those languages.
There must be a translator to just make it easy. I was just thinking about the administration part, Brad.
So why don't we try this, Madam Chair? Why don't we just see if Kathy can do something through Horsley Witten to have it done with a click of a button. But if it really drags on, I don't want to get mired in this quicksand of trying to appease, maybe appease is a bad word, trying to encompass everybody in basically a lily white town. To bring it back to my profession, I usually do not get on a majority of the Pepsi Cola buys because Cape Cod is too Caucasian. I get Pepsi, I get Diet Pepsi, and that's it. I don't get Mountain Dew that often because we don't have any kids. I don't get any of the grape flavors, orange flavors, because we don't have a minority base. It is what it is. So if the Survey Monkey can do something quick and easy with the click of a button, which is a brilliant idea, I think we should offer that availability. But if it gets into just, minutia, I think we're really causing more angst to as you said, Will, an over-surveyed market.
Well, I'm sorry, Brad. I respectfully disagree. I don't think it's an over-surveyed market. What I think is it's an uncoordinated, about to be over-surveyed market. And secondly, and I say this respectfully, we cannot sit here 18 months from now and say we did a good job if this survey isn't in Portuguese. And we can't say we did a good job. And I understand that a click of the button is a click of the button, but our job is to do the hard work. And I know you know that. So I'm going to put that over here. And I recognize that I haven't been a part of this board very long. And I recognize that some of this work has already been done and decided. However, I have been given the tasks that I have been given, and I have come back to the board. And I respectfully request that we do more than just settle for a button that says Portuguese or Spanish on a SurveyMonkey. It's not good enough. So we have a contract with a consultant who I honestly believe we can stop talking about this right now. As soon as we find out from Horsley Witten, this isn't that complicated.
No, it's not. And I think, quite frankly, it might just be a button.
But
the
Madam Chair,
important-
it's not. It may be, but we also
What-
have to
what
be
would we
willing
like
to go beyond that.
My point is, we're talking, the focus here is on the survey.
Yeah.
And making sure the survey can be understood and read by as many people in town as possible. So we know that 90% of the people in town will be able to read it and understand it. And we're trying to capture what language is the best language for the balance of that survey to be in. If we can find out more about the efficiency with which we might be able to do that, let's find out. And I think that's what I've directed Kathy to try to do is, to me, electronically, it seems like a no-brainer with Google Translate and everything else. Push a button, pick your language. However they might do that, we'll do that. We need to find out from Horsley Witten how that might happen. And then the physical survey, the paper survey, we would have to also consult with Horsley Witten as to how the most efficient way to get that done. And they are the counters, remember. They are going to be our data collectors. So we need to make sure that they're comfortable with whatever method we are going to capture the data, that they can then analyze it for us. Does that seem fair enough? Kathy?
Can I just make a suggestion? I know that we're moving forward. We're going to have the survey out there for a good 2.5 months. I don't know how quickly this can happen. I think maybe I'll check with Horsley Witten about it. I have no issues with that. But if it's going to be, well, that might take us a little bit more time to get going. I think it's worth getting going in English, start getting everyone collecting. And then if we can add the languages after we've gotten started, that would
So
be good.
maybe do it in stages is what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I don't want to lose momentum. I don't know how long it's going to take to translate or to do this. I'm hoping that we could just get started with that. And the other question, Will, is maybe when you're doing this outreach, what format would they prefer to have these things in? They may prefer paper.
And I'm going to ask those questions as I keep going, Madam Chair. And I agree that nothing should stop the momentum that has been created. So I'm glad to hear that we can continue asking these good questions. So again, when we're standing 18 months from now, we don't have to have a regret, or someone can't come to us and say, wait, you didn't do some insert simple thing here. And again, even if it happens 60 days from now, Kathy, or 90 days, it still puts us within, I think, a very reasonable time frame to get more input.
I'd like it to be something that we could implement relatively quickly, but probably not by next week. Is my
Of course,
concern.
no, and I wasn't. I didn't.
It's fine. No.
You know, I wasn't coming here to disrupt that.
We can do. I think we can do it in steps and see what the situation is. But it would be good to know if we're going to concentrate our efforts. Should it be electronically or should it be hard copy? Because we might be able to get the hard copies easier, faster, or maybe it's more complicated, or maybe it's easy to do the electronic.
Sure.
But we'll look into
And I might hear that if there's a link in Portuguese that can be texted, maybe more people can interact with that data and fill it out that way. But you're right. I need to ask the questions, and I will share that as
But
soon as
then
I have
someone
the.
needs to translate it when we
Okay,
get
I
it.
mean, again, I
So,
think Brad mentioned this before. Like it, I just want to challenge our preconceived notions
Yep.
because the idea of translating, I'm really sorry, it's just it's not that hard.
well, can you translate Portuguese? Because that would be
No.
great.
What I'm saying is there's a ton of electronic tools, Kathy, and there's tons of resources out there.
When someone handwrites something, I'm just saying it might be. It needs to be
There's
someone who knows the
OCR
language.
technology. I mean, you can scan
All
anything.
right.
I mean, I'm just. I guess what I'm saying
Yeah, we'll
is,
send that to you.
I think that Horsley Witten has more capability than we might be giving them credit for because they are faced with these kinds of challenges in the year 2020 that maybe they weren't faced with even 5 or 10 years ago.
I will definitely check in and see what they can do.
And a cost.
Of course.
We don't have any more money, so
Well, I think
we'll have
I'm
to
glad that
see
we're
what-
having the conversation, Madam Chair.
we,
So thank
we have
you.
a
I am
limited
too.
amount of money, so we'll see what we can do. And I think, like I
think
say,
we're moving in the right direction here, and Kathy's got her marching orders as to how she would like to move. Any further discussion on translation and languages? Will, I'm still with you. You had another question?
Yeah, these are one thing we talked about last week was making sure that nobody is unhappy when they finish this survey. And I think we talked about that in different ways, right? About which things to require and which things to not require. That's one thing. And then the other issue was, well, what comes first? The demographic information or let's say the short answer portion. And I totally agree that we shouldn't make anybody, no matter what the order is, Madam Chair, we shouldn't make them be angry or frustrated when they get to the end. I still am. I'm still struggling with a community survey that doesn't ask for race and gender. And I want to say it one more time, and I'm going to say it very simply. You can ask for race and gender, and you can still have a button that says, I don't want to tell you. And it can still be required. I say that, and then I will move on, because if we are trying to collect data and we are not able to take the data and analyze it and filter it based on lots of different views and considerations, not just which village do you live in our town, and not just how old are you, and not just whether you have children at home. I hope that we will continue to find ways throughout this process, if it's not in this survey, to make sure that we are also considering what is the race and what is the gender of the people who we're talking to. And to me, that's just like advanced common sense. But I also defer to the fact that this process has been going on long before I, joined the board.
On race and gender, we had talked about that last week. I don't think that it can, I would defer to town council. I don't think we can require any answer on that. I do not believe you can require to self-identify a requirement to self-identify one way or another. However, if it were an optional question, and if the board would like to add race and gender, I'd like to get, if we have to take a vote or if we have to move forward, but you've raised this a couple of times.
Well,
It's
maybe
not
we can ask it
public.
a different way so that it doesn't slow us down, because I really don't want to slow us down, because the section says, tell us about yourself. We just saw it on the screen. It says, tell us about yourself. And so that's why I keep bringing it up, because it doesn't make common sense that we wouldn't ask those questions. Tell us about yourself. We're not going to ask you your gender. We're not going to ask you your race, whether they're optional, whether they're opt-in, opt-out. I don't understand.
Yeah. Well,
Kathy, can I make a comment, Kathy?
yes, Susan.
I guess I would say, Will, if we were doing a different kind of survey, I think an optional section on race and gender, and I think Joanna's right. We cannot ask people to self-identify, because then the people can say we develop the programs based on bias for race and gender. So I agree, if we do it at all, it's got to be optional. But my question is, to what extent, if we are doing a survey on thoughts and ideas and suggestions, to what extent does race and gender influence that answer? And I
It
think that
influences every single
I
answer.
see. I don't agree with that at all,
Okay.
Will. I really
That's
don't.
okay. And that's okay.
And
And that's why we can all have a pleasant disagreement.
Yeah.
But
And
I
so-
felt like it's helpful to make sure.
See, I don't think it does. I don't think race
Okay.
and gender should. It may, but I don't think it
Okay,
should.
but that's different, Susan. Should or does are two very different things.
I don't think race and gender influences a discussion of what you think your vision of Yarmouth should be. If it's a discussion about what do you think about public housing, what do you think about, I don't know, public parks or something like that, something more finite. But and I don't care because I wouldn't answer those kinds of questions anyway. But whether we include it, if we include it at all, I think it has to be optional. And I quite frankly, asking those demographic questions is only going to allow Horsley Witten to come up with, the ideal answer, like a retired person living in Yarmouthport that is over 75 and is a white female. That's what those questions are intended to, is to put together a composite of the typical answer in Yarmouth. The typical person answering those questions for the town of Yarmouth. To the extent that those answers influence their thinking, that's what I'm concerned about. I don't think this kind of a survey, we would sort of a thought, prospective, descriptive survey, I don't think it will. But you have a different opinion about that. But those are my thoughts. I don't think it's necessary. If the board thinks we can gather something from that, fine. I'm willing to go along with it, but I don't want to see this, bog down, slow down. And my voice, if we had to take a vote now, it would be strictly optional. If people want to answer it, fine. If they don't want to answer it, don't answer it.
Any other views on this? Yes or no? I need to get some sense of where we want to go here.
I
Well,
thought
what's
we
the question,
discussed
Joanne?
it. I thought we discussed it at the last meeting, and
We
And
did, but when
it was
you
no.
but when you have a walkthrough and you have a section that is called "Tell us about yourself," I could not let it go by without bringing it up again. And I recognize that we have a very pleasant disagreement. So, Madam Chair, I would hope in the future that we would remember that we can respectfully disagree, which is what I love about this group, but that I want to make it clear that race and gender affect every single thing that every single person does at every moment of every day. Now, if we decide as a group to not include it, that's a group decision. At the same time, we have other mechanisms with which to gather some of that race or gender information. And that could be at not the survey, it could be at workshops, it could be at some focus groups, it could be at future things that we might try to do over the next 18 months. So again, not interested in slowing down a process that started before I got to this board, but I will say I am still mystified as to why we're not willing to ask those questions. And if we don't, then we won't. But I felt like it was important to say what I needed to say. And I am not wishing to make a motion.
No, your voice is very important, Will, and the discussion is important. The question, I think, may have been asked and answered last week, and I appreciate you reminding us again of the importance of this. But again, for the purposes of this survey, the question is whether or not those identifiers are critical for the survey to be successful. And what I'm hearing is that they're not the most critical self-identifiers as how you describe yourself, because there are 100 ways I could describe myself. Some might say sexual orientation is really important. Some might say, your ethnic background. So
Also,
I think what we
income,
wanted to-
Joanne.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say income is also very important,
And we're not asking that.
and we're not
There are
asking
lots
that.
of things trying to.
That's
Thank you, Susan. So I think your voice here is important. Your opinion is so eloquently stated. For the purposes of the survey, what I'm hearing as a consensus from the board, and I heard it last week, is that that's not critical to make this survey be a success.
I understand.
Am
And
I
so
understating, overstating? Please, board members, I need some sense that this is the direction we want to go. Tom, you,
I agree with your point of view.
Okay. and
John.
Brad, you've already expressed your view. Susan,
Just want to
yours?
add one thing. I mean, if you can ask any question if it's optional. I have a transgendered 32-year-old, and he can't stand the fact that he's asked those questions. But if it's optional, he has no problem filling out a survey. And he's a doctor at UConn. So I quite understand about that. So again, if there's going to be a vote, I'm sorry I missed it last week taking care of autism, and now we're talking about transgendered. I have no problem if it's optional. You can ask anything you want if it's optional, because then he, she, or whomever has the right to opt out and go to the next question.
Right.
So that's all.
If you're trying to get at the maybe some underrepresented people, if you wanted to ask for race in, it seems like are these all white or non-white? I mean, maybe it's just binary. It's not like we don't go through every, because whenever I've seen like the list, there are like 9 things.
Sure.
But if you really want to know, did we catch our minority populations in this survey? That simple optional question might get you there. And if you want to add, how old are you? And then after that, male or female, and then you could ask optional,
So we could, and thank you, Brad. I appreciate that. As former chairman, I wish you were in my seat right now. But I feel like you're right there next to me, which you are. So it sounds like we're moving towards as the notion that it's optional, and that again, I think limiting it to a binary answer, or in the case of gender, would have to have an other, male, female, other, and white, non-white. Can everybody move forward with that? Optional? Anything else optional on the survey, or remind me, Kathy, everything else is?
no, everything else was mandatory unless you say it's going to be optional.
Okay. And if someone chooses not to answer, they missed it, they didn't do it deliberately, we'll still,
Maybe there's a do not want to answer button.
so the answer is, I don't want to answer.
Right.
Okay.
Or prefer
Um,
to say, or something
yeah.
like that.
I think I've seen it written, prefer not to answer or something
Yeah.
along those lines. I'm being very generic. I think if the whole thing is optional, Madam Chair, as has already been discussed, I think that gives us the ability to ask important questions, but not cross any perceived lines.
Well, I'm going to just check you on that. Well, I thought we agreed last week that it wouldn't be optional. It's the price of admission.
Well, but
And some might be optional.
and maybe just the smartest thing to do after a healthy discussion over multiple meetings is to not go down the road of race and gender. And the reason I say that, and let me explain really quickly why, is that because statistically, which I understand Susan's point and everyone else's point about what kind of survey is this, and statistically, I'm not sure if it's going to be helpful. If we have optional white and non-white, and we have optional gender, because it just may not be worth the statistical outcome that is going to be poor. I'll just put it that way. Because requiring it, I can understand those discussions have been had. I needed to bring it up one more time.
Okay.
But I also recognize that there's a majority of this board that don't feel necessarily they should be required. And I am not here to disrupt the last 18 months worth of work to get to this point. But I feel like in the future and moving forward, we should consider these issues in a different way and maybe in a different format. And perhaps there's ways to even do that when we get to Zoom meetings or breakout rooms or focus groups, where we could give people the chance to say, I live here, I'm from here, I'm this old, and I choose to say other things. So I guess what I'm trying to say, and then I'll be quiet, is I don't think we need to add anything about race and gender to this survey if it's optional. And I understand that it's not the will of the board to add it to the survey if it's required.
Well, but Will, I think Joanne brought up a point, and maybe she wants to check with town council, but I think there's a concern about making those two questions a requirement of participation.
Yeah,
Joanne,
I know you
Okay.
can't. You can't.
My
You can't,
apologies,
okay.
Susan. I understand now.
yeah, so by default, it's got to be optional.
It's got to be optional.
Right. And so,
It's whether or not we put it on.
yeah,
Right.
And whether or not that would change the value of their
Right.
answer to their first three questions,
That's
which
my
is
whole
all we
point.
really want from them.
Right.
I don't
That's
really
my whole
care
point.
about the rest. It's additional information that's going to help us know who responded. The most important thing is, what do you like, what do you don't like, and what do you see for the future? That's all I
Right.
want. That's all I want. That's all I care about.
Right.
well, okay. I mean, but what village you live in is pretty important.
Oh, I
And
agree.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say I don't care.
no, I know that. I know that's not what you meant. But what I'm saying is, it really, this has been thoroughly vetted, Madam Chair, and discussed well before I became a member of the planning board. I think it's fair to say that if I was a member of the planning board a year ago, that this survey would be a lot different. At least I would have impressed upon some of these things earlier in the process before we got to this point. Because I would have fundamentally asked, what is this survey for? And we're not doing that because that question's already been thoroughly discussed. But this feels a little bit of a halfway house where, and not in the English version of the word, not the United States version, meaning we're not necessarily asking for this big clump of statistic demographic data. However, we also want to know, what do people want from their emotion and their vibe and their feeling for the future of our town? But the correlation between those two things inform each other. And so
they do.
we're not necessarily going to be doing an excellent job of both.
Right. And I don't want this meeting to become a dialogue or a conversation about
Yes.
all of that. Again, I'd like to bring
Clear.
it back to, what are the most important questions we would like to know about the individuals who are completing the survey? And now I'm hearing that maybe race and gender aren't as important. I'm hearing that race and gender is important. Race and gender can only be optional. So let's start there. Race and gender can only be optional. Is it worth putting it back on the survey? What's the harm in putting it on? There could be harm in not putting it on.
And I think that's sort of
Downside
why
risk-
I originally brought it up, is because I
understand.
feel like it opens ourselves up to some criticism in 18 months from now that maybe we didn't have to take
By
Madam Chair?
including,
by not including it,
by not including
by
it.
not
Madam
including
Chair-
it.
So
Madam Chair-
what's the,
Madam
again,
Chair, could I make a motion?
yes, Susan, help us out.
I move that we put race and gender on the survey under an optional category.
Do I have a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
Discussion? I'm ready for a vote. We'll do a roll call vote. Tom?
No,
Will?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Joanne? Yes.
So I'm going to put
So
it
moved.
on, I'm going to put it on that way as optional, but the way I talked about white, non-white. Okay. Just the only comment that Horsley Witten did mention is you don't want to ask so many questions that people feel that you don't want people to feel that their weight of their comment is stronger if you're of this category or that
Right.
category. Do you, if I live in Yarmouthport, do you care more about what I think or not? So that's the only comment that Horsley Witten had with regard to getting too many questions. They were fine with these questions. These are pretty typical questions that I've seen on these types of things. But we can certainly add that in.
Okay, so we had four, the vote was 4-1, and we do have a quorum, so, okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Tom, sorry, you've been waiting patiently to comment on other parts of the survey?
No, Will mentioned earlier NAACP. And I don't know if anyone has made an outreach to the organization or that's here on the Cape. I know the head of it is a minister, I think, over in Falmouth. But the second in authority with the NAACP is John Green, who's deputy director of Yarmouth Housing Authority, and I'm fairly friendly with John, and I can make that contact.
Great. Okay, thank you. If you would do that, Tom, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I'll be able to see him immediately within the next day or two. I'll probably see him at precinct 6 when he comes to vote, because I'll be there too.
Okay.
Tom, maybe we could, Madam Chair, if it's possible that Tom could email one of us so that maybe I could connect him with Lieutenant Bogdan as well, because again, we're trying to broaden.
I'm sure the police know who John Green is.
Tom, I hear you 100%, but what I'm saying respectfully is we still should connect people even when we think they're connected.
Well, this is the protocol I'd like to follow, which we've been following all along. Tom, when you make outreach to Mr. Green, if you could make sure Kathy knows about it, and that she will make sure that the other members of the board are so informed. We can't communicate amongst ourselves, and you can't talk to us as a group. So if you wouldn't mind, the outcomes from that meeting, if you could make sure Kathy's aware of that particular outreach, that would be great. And if you care to copy Chief Frederickson, that's fine. But we'll get the information. Everyone on the board will get the information.
Understood. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, that's a homework assignment. I've got it on my to-do list.
I did my other homework assignment. I did the video.
The video. I didn't have you down for a homework assignment on video, Tom.
Oh, wait a minute. I did a video.
It's a different meeting. That's a different committee.
I did a video for RAC. Sorry about that.
Tom, you got to get your committee straight here.
I thought our screen was about to turn into a wastewater management video.
Man, I spent hours preparing for this meeting. How did I miss the video? Anyway.
Sorry about that.
Back to business. Any other comments on the survey as amended? Great. Okay, Kathy, I think we have a green light on that. Would you like to also just give us a brief forward look on the public presentation for next week? Yep. Just talk us through that. I think that was the next thing you and I had talked about covering.
Yeah, just one second. So I am actually going before the Rotary Club at 7 o'clock in the morning. I regularly go to the Rotary. They every month someone's assigned someone who has to get guests to come to the Rotary Club, and whoever knows me, asks me if I have anything. So I'm just going to give a little overview that's kind of be the preliminary basis for the kickoff meeting that's going to be at the planning board next week, which, let me just pull this over. It's basically going to be a pretty simple presentation, kind of outlining for everybody, what is visioning, why are we doing it, why is it important, and how do we get there? Obviously, we need your public input, and that's how we're going to get there. Kind of going over saying, well, before we start looking in the future, let's take a look at where we are now and talking about all those different data sheets that we had developed so that people understand that information is out there and the basic information on where we are today and what kind of things we're working on is available. And then giving people the information on how to get involved. Talking on Friday, I'll be talking about the kickoff meeting, but at the kickoff meeting, we'll be talking about, hopefully we'll have that launched on the website already for the survey, at least the initial English version. And then we'll also be talking about the 3 virtual workshops. I'm working with Kyle to deal with the setting them up with the registration and the breakout rooms and that type of thing. Identifying to people that there is going to be a maximum of 80 participants per workshop, the breakout rooms, and then also telling people the details of where they can go. And then just kind of going into the workshop and survey questions so people have an understanding of what kind of information we're going to be asking of them, and going through those 3 questions. And then just kind of explaining to them what we're going to be doing with all of this information. We're going to be processing it, coming up with major topics and key issues, and then developing that draft vision statement, which then we'll go back out and vet that, more workshops, another survey before we work on the drafting of the vision plan itself, which would then go out for another vetting in the fall of 2021. And then just kind of leaving it open to questions. I think I'm going to really emphasize people going to the town website, signing up for the constant contact. I think that that's been very useful, and just see what questions people have. So it'll be a very similar presentation at the Rotary as it will be on Wednesday.
Okay. Kathy, one other thing you mentioned to me was the review with town council with regard to open meeting law.
Yeah, when we originally came up with a modified plan due to COVID-19 and had the virtual meetings, we were talking about the different breakout rooms and the planning board members being facilitators. Tracy Post had a question of how that would impact open meeting law. And so I've just reached out to town council, and she's given me some directions on how to post it. We're not deliberating anything. Most of the time, you guys won't even be in quorum. You'll be in your individual breakout rooms. So I think we'll be fine. But I did reach out and get that language so that we'll be kosher with the open meeting law.
Thank you. Anything else on visioning, Kath? We've pretty good on that.
Yeah, I've just been, kind of peppering out. We got some stuff on Channel 18 talking about the kickoff meeting. Hopefully people have seen the stuff on the Community Information Board. I've sent out some information directly to the different groups and the schools, all the civic groups and all those different organizations. Susan has a great list of like 400 different people from different organizations, and she's going to be sending out that information hopefully on Friday when her computer comes back in.
Maybe tomorrow, Kathy. They told me
Ooh,
it might be ready tomorrow. So, but I will CC you.
perfect.
Obviously, when I send it out. In fact, I was going to forward to them that email you sent me with all of the dates and times.
Exactly. That would be
Okay.
perfect.
That was
would
the
be
plan. Yep.
Yep.
And I'll CC you on that, Kathy.
That would be awesome. And if for some reason tomorrow you're not going to get your computer back, let me know and I'll send it out to the people, the contacts I have in those different groups. At least get it to those people.
Yeah, it should be tomorrow.
Perfect.
Well, first thing, I want to get a hold of Susan's Rolodex. 400? That's great. Thank you, Susan. We really appreciate that.
Wait,
All those years in
400
Washington.
Wait. Let me just clarify something. 8 of those items in my Rolodex are associations, which in turn have 50 to 100 members.
Right.
So, that's how it balloons out into like 400 people that I can get a hold of immediately, because I asked the presidents to then turn around and drill it down to their membership. So, and it's been very effective. I mean, you all saw how effective it was with the windmills.
Susan,
Yeah, thank you so much for offering to do that, Susan. The multiplier effect is really
Right.
important.
Right. And they are active neighbors. I mean, they're active citizens.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
I
Yes,
haven't been
Tom?
sending them out myself, but I think coming from Susan, their friend and stuff, I'm hoping that, I don't know whether people necessarily are sending it to their memberships, even though I send them something asking. I'd like to think that if it comes from Susan, it'll have a little more weight. So that'd be great.
Yeah, yes, Tom?
yeah, Susan, when you say neighborhood associations, are they clustered mostly in the West Yarmouth area or
Yes.
over the whole town?
No, just West Yarmouth, south of 28, generally from Hyannis Park down through Great Island. Generally that area. The only area that does not have an association, ironically, the homeowners along in Colonial Acres down Standish Road off 28, they have no, if you can believe, they have no neighborhood association or homeowners association. So when we do flyers or we generally almost have to go door to door down there because there's no common bulletin board. There's no like one person that you can go to and say, "Will you get this out to the neighborhood?" But everyone else has a beach association or a very strong homeowners association.
Okay, well, because I'm aware that there is an association, North Sandy side, up by Dennis Pond. There's at least a couple neighborhood associations near the just south of Buck Island Road, in the general vicinity of generally.
Well, Tom, do you have contact information for these groups?
Unfortunately, no.
Oh.
But I know that these groups do exist. So there are other small associations, and then of course there's got to be some participation up on the north side. As I said, North Sandy is on the north side, but I'm sure that the rest of Yarmouth Port area is got something. King's Way is certainly
Yeah, that's
one
an
area.
obvious one.
So all I'm saying is if you talk about associations, there's more than just Western.
Right, absolutely.
Thank you.
I have a bunch of contact information for different associations outside of the area that Susan was talking about. Lee Rowley is on the one of the boards at our former planning board member at Kingsway. So I sent him something today, hoping that he could send that along to people. The north side is a little more difficult from a association standpoint. There's no obligation for anyone to provide contact information on their associations to the town of Yarmouth. It would be great if they did, then we would have all of that information. We've compiled a bunch of information as part of the Water Resources Advisory Group and that advocacy. But there are definitely some holes. So if anyone knows anything, that would definitely be great. And again, we're just sending them also to a lot of different organizations like, the Friends of Bass River, the Historical Society of Yarmouth. So a bunch of places like that, hoping that they'll continue to distribute that amongst their members. It would be really good to know how many people actually have been getting contacted this way, because some people respond and say, "Oh yeah, I'll do that, thank you," and some people don't, but then just forward it along. So it's a little hard to know.
The multiplier effect that Susan mentioned is very correct, but we shouldn't ignore all the other potential organizations that are out there. They may only be 10, 15, 20 people on some of them, or like Susan said, they may be many from each group, but some of them are just what they are, for their neighborhood, their street, but don't ignore them.
I don't think we intend to do that, Tom. We'll search them out as best we can. But again, the north side is a little tricky. Other than Kingsway, which is a large group of residents, when you think about it, that will be challenging. We'll do our best for sure. But as people get contacts, if they could feed them to Kathy, that would be helpful.
That would
If
be very
in a
helpful.
conversation or something, if we get contacts on the north side, that would be great. So thank you.
And if people could let me know, it would be good to know where you put your flyer, just so that we have a general idea of what parts of town got covered. And I'm hoping that we got, like I had mentioned, like Peterson's Market, and I'm hoping that people have got some places up on the north side as well.
Well, I've already placed one at Jack's Out Back. So
Oh, there you go.
Jack's
That's where
Out
Will
Back
was going to go.
Jack's Out Back is covered.
Kathy, if you
Any other further questions or
You can
comments?
just send those to me, guys. You don't have to.
all right.
Okay, moving on. Kathy, you had mentioned you do not have minutes ready yet for last meeting, so we have no approval of minutes. I'm sorry about that. Zoning board, I think they did meet last week, or no?
They did.
They
Yep.
did meet last week, yes.
Yep.
Any report out there that we need to be concerned about? Well, Tom was there, so. Tom, anything on zoning board of appeals?
There was one item that was withdrawn, and that has to do with 29 Lewis Bay Boulevard. And it was withdrawn without prejudice, and so we'll probably be seeing that. But all the other items were granted that were on the agenda. The last one was another not the last one. One of the first out of the last three was another family home daycare. Again, six people, six children as a limit. But that went through very, very, very quickly.
Okay, great. Moving on to committee updates. Any members have committee meetings in the last week? Okay. Any board member items? Yes, Will.
Just wanted to ask about facilitator training. I hope I didn't miss that. Because I know we're having a meeting. No, not the training. I meant, I know we're having a meeting. The kickoff meeting is next week and the training is on the 10th. What I wanted to just bring up to you, Madam Chair, is a really good problem to have, which is, what if we don't have enough facilitators?
I can.
Thank you, Kathy.
Karen, Kyle, and myself are also going to obviously be taking the facilitators. So that would allow it. And we also, at least one of the people from Horsley Witten in a pinch could also do it. I don't think we want our groups to be more than 8 people. So that's why it would really be a maximum of 80 people who could register for each workshop. So once you register, if for some reason it's full, you would be given an email indicating that, as well as referring them to other workshop dates and or to the survey. Ultimately, if we find that a lot of people are unable to register for a meeting, I mean, that would be a great problem to have if we have 240 people sign up for our 3 workshops. We may need to have some additional ones if people want to participate in that manner.
Well, that is all wonderful news. I'm more focused on the other end of the issue, Kathy, and I'm sorry I didn't make that more clear, but sometimes people get sick. Sometimes people have to travel. Sometimes people have conflicts when they're supposed to be a facilitator. And so I would like to urge the board to consider training more people than we think we're going to need. And I would also encourage us to think about other members of our town committees that are actually professionals at facilitating and know how to do this stuff. I know that sounds very mundane and very broad, but there are some members of our community that could provide that value. Not saying that we won't be amazing at it. I mean, look at Tom, he's raring to go. But I feel like there's a lot of community members out there that if only 4 of us can show up to be a facilitator, that would be
Do you have someone in mind, Will?
unfortunate.
Do you have
I
people
do.
in mind?
Wait,
Okay.
what?
Do you have people
do.
in mind to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's some just really good folks out there that we should consider. I don't know what the format is to raise this. I guess I just did. I mean, I think Richard Simon, who I know very well from the golf committee and from the Yarmouth Library Planning Committee, has probably 30 years of experience in facilitating and group development. And I think those kinds of folks, we should at least make them aware of these opportunities, Madam Chair, because again, it just makes our bullpen bigger. And you only have to ask the manager of the Tampa Bay Rays what happens when you mess up your bullpen. Sorry, I had to make that joke as a lifelong baseball fan.
It's okay.
Well,
Well, I'd like to think that we'll be able to match supply and demand here to the degree that we can. It will be really important, first out, that any of us who cannot make a meeting alert Kathy as soon as we know that we can't, so that we absolutely have a backfill. It sounds like we won't need more than 10 at any fully engaged session. And we'll find a way to make sure that we have enough facilitators. I think it could get a little tricky broadening it in terms of training. Kathy, help me if that's not an issue. If we can provide training to non-planning board, non-town government staff.
I honestly haven't thought about it. I don't
Yeah.
know whether it's an
You're-
issue.
it hasn't come up as-
I've
Yeah,
never, yeah.
Well,
I-
hopefully it won't be a problem.
I hope it's not either. And again,
Well, thank you.
I'm excited that if we do, Kathy, as you mentioned, get 240 people, I'll do a dance with you.
Mm.
At the same time, I just want to make it clear that there's so much that's uncertain, and we'll just leave it there, that we should try to be prepared for uncertainty. That's all I'm
You
trying
know,
to say.
the facilitator meetings are, I mean, it's going to be open. I mean, if he would like to watch, and
Again,
participate, then
It just struck me, Madam
Yeah.
Chair. And I bring these things up in the interest of having the best process down the road, so that when we look back on it, we couldn't say, gosh, if we had just trained 5 more people.
I hear you, and I appreciate it. I appreciate your concern. We will make this process work, and I do believe that we'll have the right resources in the right meetings at the right time.
Thank
That
you,
will
Madam
not-
Chair.
That hopefully will not be one of the reasons we get ourselves into trouble. There might be a whole host of others, but hopefully not that one.
The good kind of trouble,
hope I'm
not
not
the bad
speaking-
kind. Right.
Yeah, I hope I'm not speaking too stridently here, Kathy, because I just committed you to making sure everything goes perfectly. Yeah, okay. Any other board member items? Okay. Correspondence, Kathy?
Well, we haven't
No.
really had a lot of correspondence
Yeah,
lately.
in the
No,
last week.
No.
And staff updates as well, probably anything from last week? Different?
No. I can't
Changed.
think, I'm sorry. I can't think of anything else.
Okay, yeah, I'm sure you're on overload.
Madam
now.
Chair, when we meet again, I think it's fair to say we should plant a little stake in the ground. There's an election on Tuesday. This is not a political conversation, but we have to recognize that we're not sure what's going to happen next week. And I would hope that the chair and the staff would be aware of whatever does happen next week and put that in the context of our committee. Thank you.
Okay. Our next meeting, thank you for that transition, Will. Our next meeting is November 4th, the day after November 3rd. And we will have information that'll be coming out. Kathy and I expect you will receive information on that Monday. Kathy, you and I
Yeah.
talked about
Yep.
actually having a draft of what the presentation will look like. So we'll give you kind of a pre-work on what we'll be presenting publicly on Wednesday for all of you to be able to see it in advance. And if there are any glaring issues with regard to that, we can make those adjustments on Tuesday, so that we're all Tuesday, Wednesday, so that we are all in agreement as to what we'll be saying on Monday. But it's nothing different than what Kathy has covered with all of us many times over the last several months. Okay. I think we're, yes, Tom?
I move to adjourn.
Second,
May I have a second? Thank you, Susan. Take a roll call vote. Tom, Darren,
Aye.
Brad Goodwin,
Aye.
Will Rubenstein,
Aye.
Susan Britta,
aye.
Joanne Crowley, aye. Thank you all. We'll
Thank
see you
you,
next
everybody.
week. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks
Thank you,
for everything.
Kathy.
Thank you.